Okay everyone, so let's get on with converting our blockout texture into a normal map. But first, before we start, I'll go and save our blockout texture as an industrial door normal map, PSD. And I'm doing that because I don't want to lose our blockout by mistake, and we want to keep it as a separate file because later on we'll be also using our blockout texture to create our diffuse. Okay, so now let's bring nDo into our view. Now, for those who have not used nDo before, I'm going to quickly explain how it works. In nDo, you can create normal maps in three ways. One way is to work with selections, where you create a selection on your image, and then you simply click this window here to create a normal map layer. Then you can adjust several settings that affect the way this normal map layer will look. The second way is to work with height maps. And for those who are not familiar with height maps, height map is an image which is black and white. So, for example, if I were to go and paint some black here and maybe some white on top of it, this would be a very basic height map. So in this case, the black parts of this image would represent the lowest points of the surface, whereas the white parts would represent the highest parts. Now it's quite difficult to visualize how this would look as a normal map, but later on you will see how it works, and it's actually really easy. Now, the third way of creating normal maps with nDo is to basically use brushes. You can create something called a sculpt layer, where you basically just paint an area with your brush and it will be automatically converted into a normal map. But we're gonna leave that for now because I'll explain that properly later. In this video we'll be using all three methods, and essentially we will split the whole process into three parts. First, we're going to focus on those main shapes, and we'll be mainly working with the selections. Then we're going to add some smaller details such as screws, maybe some rivets, maybe some even smaller trims. And finally, we're going to paint in some damage such as, I don't know, scratches, maybe some dents, and so on. Okay, now before we start, we need to change one setting in nDo. So I'll go to File, Preferences, Flip Normal Channels, and I'll make sure that Flip Y is selected. Now the reason why we have to do this is because otherwise our normal map would look quite odd. If you left it unselected, our normal map would look like the light is coming from a different side. So we have to make sure that Flip Y is selected. Okay, so now let's get started. So I'll scroll down to our door panels layer, and I'll move it to the very top. Okay, now I'm going to go and fill this layer with white color. This will essentially improve its intensity. Now I'll simply go and click Convert and make sure that no edge bevel is deselected. Now let's wait a second. And as you can see, we've got our normal map. Now if I go and click this button here, we'll be able to preview our normal map. Okay, let's zoom in. And yeah, now we can tweak the settings. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I will adjust the size of the bevels. So if I go and adjust the size, maybe to something like 4, you can see that the bevels become slightly thicker. Maybe let's make them slightly bigger. Okay. Now we can also adjust a bunch of other settings. If we go and change the curve to something like half round, you will see that our bevels become slightly rounded. Now you can see it very well here, but if I go and zoom in on our image, you can see that they're indeed quite round. Now, there's a bunch of other settings in nDo which you can change, like, let's say, the shape. Right now we've got smooth, but if you go and change it to chiseled, you can see that everything becomes a lot sharper. Now we can also control the depth of our layer. And we can also make it softer. And that will basically blur the whole normal map, as you can see. Basically working with nDo is quite easy. You can also adjust the slant of the normal layer, so you can maybe make it point down. I'll show you how it looks like now. So you can see we've created some indents. So Basically, with nDo you can create all kinds of effects very easily. Okay, so now that we've got the basics covered, let's go and let's add some more layers to our normal map. First, I'll go and rename this layer to something appropriate. Okay, and now I'll go and add our door frames. So I'll move this layer to the top, and the reason why I do this is just for convenience, so that our normal group stays on the top. I'll go and zoom out. And now once again, I'm going to go and convert it to a white color. And as you can see, the intensity changes as well. Once again, I'll make sure that no edge bevel is deselected. And this will prevent nDo from hiding bevels along the canvas. So I'll go and convert. And again, we've got some bevels already. So again, I'll go and adjust the size. And I'll make the curve slightly rounded. Okay. And maybe for this layer, I'll go and maybe lower the depth a bit. Okay. Now let's go and let's change the name of this layer to door frames. And now let's simply go ahead and let's start adding more and more layers. Now, with this door metal trim layer, we don't really have to move it to the top and paint it with white because this layer doesn't really collide with the borders of the canvas. So in this case, we simply have to right-click on this layer and make sure that we use select pixels. And then you simply have to click convert. And as you can see, this layer will be moved right to the top. Now we can get rid of this one. Now I'll go and change the name of this group to metal trim door. Okay. And now before we start adjusting the size of the bevel, we have to zoom in a little bit, because right now we can see the bevel seems quite thick, but it's not its actual size. When we zoom in, you will see that it's actually a lot smaller. So when you work with the bevels, it's best to be zoomed in at 100%. Okay, so I'll just quickly go and change the size, maybe tweak the shape and set it to chiseled. Now I'm going to go and change the curve to Gaussian and maybe lower the depth a bit. Okay. Now let's do the same with the Windows frame layer. So again, right click, select pixels, and let's click convert. Now, for this layer, I think I'll keep it as it is, because we want to keep those bevels fairly thin. Okay, so I'll just go and rename it, Windows Frames. And now let's go ahead and let's do the same with the glass. So select pixels, convert. Okay. And now with this bevel, we want it to look as if the frames are actually pointing inwards. So I'll go and change the slant to down. And now, when I click the toggle previewer on, you will see what it looks like. Right. Now, I think we could use some more detail in here. So what I'm going to do is I will make another trim inside those windows. So to do that, I'll go and open up our current nDo group. I'll right-click on this layer, click Select Pixels. I'll go to Select, Modify, Contract, and I'll go with something like maybe 8 pixels. Okay. Now, let's go and let's click Convert. And let's also change the slant to down. Okay. And now, when I go and preview the normal map, you will see that we also have a second set of trims inside the windows. So it will look like the glass is actually being held in place by some kind of a metal trim. Right. Now, the problem we have with this normal map is that we have some aliasing here, and that's because our bevels are very thin. So what I'm going to do is I'll go and tweak them a little bit. So I'll change the size, something bigger. Maybe that's a bit too big. Okay. I'll adjust the depth. Maybe I'll make them slightly smoother. Okay. And I'll also go and do the same with the other layer. Let's change this. And let's increase the softness. Okay. And now we can see that the aliasing is a lot lower. We can still see some aliasing, but that's mostly because this video is being recorded at 128 by 720. So when you preview this at a higher resolution in a game engine with anti-aliasing and so on, it will look a lot better. Okay, now let's go and let's rename this layer. So I'll go and call this one Windows Top Trim Outer. And this one I'll call Windows Top Trim Inner. Alright. Now let's remove those two layers. We don't need those anymore. And now I'll go and add this metal trim top layer. Now this layer does in fact collide with the borders of the canvas, so we have to move it to the top. And fill it in with a white color. Now let's make sure that no edge bevel is deselected. Okay. I'll just move the canvas slightly. And let's adjust the size. Maybe the depth. Okay, now as you have probably noticed, we have used those same settings for more than one of our layers. So what we can do to make things easier for us, we can make those settings the defaults. So I'll simply have to click the Make Default button. And now every new layer we create will use those same settings. Okay, let's rename this layer to Metal Trim Top. And now let's add metal panels. But actually, when I think about it, we don't really need another layer here, because we have two layers around it that create an impression of the surface pointing inwards. So when I go and look at the previewer, you will see that this area seems to be recessed. So we can leave that layer alone for now. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's add windows to our door. So I'll go and select this layer, convert, and as you can see, our default settings are applied. Okay, so I think that actually works quite well. But now let's go ahead and let's add a second bevel inside those windows. So I'll go and click on this layer, click Select Pixels. Now I'll go to Select, Modify, Contract, and I'll make this selection a bit smaller. So I'll go with maybe 8 pixels. Maybe let's make it a bit smaller. I think 2 should be okay. Okay. And now let's go and let's click Convert. And for this layer, we'll change the slant to point down. Now let's increase the size to something like this. And also let's go and let's change the shape to chiseled to give it a very hard look. I think maybe the size is a bit too big, so I'll change it to 13. And let's see what it looks like. Okay. So as you can see, we have made windows in just a very few short steps. Okay, so we're almost done here, so I'll just quickly go and I will add handles to our door. So I'll go with Select Pixels, Convert, and that's pretty much it. Okay, now let's go and let's preview our final texture. And now we can't really see the sides of this cube too well, so what we're going to do is we'll change the preview mode of nDo. I'll right click on this box here, and now we'll simply go and select the sharp cube here. And now we can see our entire texture. Okay, So now before we finish, let's go and let's make some very final tweaks. So first I'll go and change the names of those layers to something that makes sense. So I'll call this one the Windows Trim Outer, and I'll change this one to the Windows Trim Inner, and this one to door handles. Okay. Now, I think this trim here is a bit too thin, so what I'm gonna do is I'll go down to metal trim top, and I'll go and tweak its size a bit. I think that's a lot better. Now, we can also adjust the size of the frames a little bit. So again, I'll scroll down to door frames, and I'll go and increase the size. Okay. Now let's also go and change the depth a little bit. Let's increase it to something like this, and wait a second for nDo to update it. Okay. Now let's zoom in a little bit. And yeah, I think our normal map is pretty much perfect for now. So as you can see, creating basic normal maps with nDo is very simple. Of course, at this point we still need to add some smaller elements such as screws, and of course we left out the hinges, but we'll take care of all of that in the next part of this video. So see you in a second.